Tonight, we begin with a development that US officials, NATO planners, and geopolitical analysts had feared, dismissed, and quietly prepared for. A development that unfolded not over decades of decline, but in just days. Days that exposed the limits of American authority. Days that reordered alliances. Days that forced Europe to confront a reality it had avoided. What Vladimir Putin did crossed a line that Washington and Brussels had hoped would never be tested so directly. And when that line broke, the response was immediate, not hesitant, not symbolic, but urgent, coordinated, and revealing. For years now, there had been signals, not official declarations, not formal doctrine, just persistent indicators that Russia was preparing something structural, not tactical. Putin has been confrontational, yes, but he has also been methodical in his confrontations. His moves followed a recognizable pattern, a cycle, almost a doctrine. Escalate pressure, wait for reaction, exploit hesitation. But what set off alarm bells in Washington, Brussels, and Berlin this time was that the pattern stopped. No rhetoric, no escalation, no visible signaling. Experts who monitor financial flows, military posture, diplomatic traffic, and energy settlements know the indicators. Sudden silence in official messaging, quiet coordination with non-Western economies, shifts in settlement currencies, and a sudden absence of noise. All of it went quiet, and whenever Putin goes quiet, something is about to get loud. Early this month, Western intelligence and financial monitoring bodies detected what they described as a coordinated strategic shift, including financial and diplomatic moves that had not been executed in this combination in over a decade. These are the kinds of moves Russia only deploys when it is signaling something very specific. Strategic defiance, systemic decoupling, or long-term confrontation. Observers didn't know which category this belonged to, or whether it belonged to all three at once. But what they did know was this: Russia was changing posture, not tactics. And when a nuclear power with global reach shifts posture, even subtly, every alliance pays attention. The warnings issued by Washington and NATO leadership were not routine. They were not symbolic. They were not delayed. They were urgent. Officials speaking after emergency consultations described Putin's move as deliberate, escalatory, and most importantly, systemic, because it targeted credibility, not territory. But pressure strategies only work if the target hesitates. This time, Russia did not. Within hours of the trigger event, the United States and its allies moved, not with speeches alone, but with financial signaling, diplomatic coordination, and alliance-level reassessment. These were not ordinary responses. These were extraordinary measures, the kind deployed when the risk is not war, but loss of authority. Tonight, multiple Western sources confirm that Russia's action targeted something far more sensitive than borders or battlefields. It targeted the enforcement layer of U.S. global power. Russia moved before the West could counter. They redirected trade mechanisms. They reinforced alternative settlement systems. They synchronized messaging across non-Western blocs. In other words, Russia targeted the connective tissue of US-led order. Not symbolism, not rhetoric, but functionality. This is what made the response so urgent. Putin's move wasn't theatrical, it was actionable. It represented the kind of maneuver that could normalize alternatives if left unanswered. And the West responded not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't overreact militarily. They didn't escalate recklessly. They focused on containment and reassurance. Here's where the story becomes even more intense. According to analysts aligned with the thinking of Varoufakis, Putin's move was not about immediate gain. It was about testing belief. Testing whether the world still believes U.S. authority is unavoidable. Russia wanted to see whether Europe would fracture, whether allies would hesitate, whether alternatives would suddenly seem viable. But instead of collapse, something subtler happened. The West responded strongly but defensively. That response was so calculated, so controlled, that Moscow noticed. You don't get Putin's attention easily, but this did. Analysts described Russia's strategy as accelerated exposure, a way to reveal underlying fragilities. And Europe's reaction confirmed something critical. Unity still exists, but it is no longer effortless. As reports continued coming in, the scale of the response became clear. The U.S. reinforced alliance messaging, forcing reassurance campaigns. European states accelerated internal coordination under pressure. Non-aligned countries quietly observed without choosing sides. This wasn't collapse. This wasn't panic. This was stress testing. And stress testing is the one thing empires and alliances fear most. For every move Russia made, the West countered, but at increasing cost. Remember, the West assumed economic pressure would be decisive. Unity would be automatic. Authority would remain unquestioned. But tonight, the opposite is unfolding. Pressure is absorbed. Unity is negotiated. Authority is debated. What makes this moment so dangerous and so revealing is that Putin acted while Western leaders were under immense pressure. Elections, inflation, public fatigue, alliance strain. Different factions want different outcomes. Some want escalation. Some want stabilization. Some want disengagement. Some want endurance. And leaders balancing those demands don't act from strength. They act from constraint. Official statements emphasized rules-based order and collective resolve. That is diplomatic language for, we cannot afford erosion. You don't hear that tone unless something fundamental is being tested. Western leaders addressed their publics in measured, controlled speeches. They spoke of resilience. They spoke of unity. They spoke of long-term resolve. These were not victory speeches. They were confidence maintenance. What makes this even more concerning is that Russia did not move alone. Alongside it, other powers increased trade outside dollar systems. Global South states remained neutral day. Alternative institutions gained quiet traction, all within the same time frame. When multiple systems shift together, it signals rebalancing. Analysts now see three paths. One, the West reasserts authority through adaptation. Another, a multipolar equilibrium accelerates. A third, fragmentation deepens. Today, the West blocked the worst outcome, but it did not reverse the trend. What we are watching now is a test of credibility. Russia wants proof the old order is weakening. The U.S. wants to show it still defines the system. Europe wants stability without fracture. No one wants collapse. But no one controls everything anymore. Sources say monitoring continues. They say coordination is intense. They say responses are calibrated. And they say Putin's move was not an end, but a beginning. As the coming weeks unfold, more will become clear. But what we know now is this. U.S. authority was challenged, not destroyed. Europe's strategy was exposed, not abandoned. NATO was strained, not broken. What happens next depends on what Putin does next. And tonight, for the first time in years, global power feels negotiable. Capitals are quiet, too quiet. And when power goes quiet, recalculation is underway. Because tonight, Putin learned something. And so did the West. Authority is no longer automatic. Unity requires maintenance. And the next phase will define the century. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The system has shifted. The pressure has moved. And the world is watching what comes next. And we will be here watching every move as that next phase unfolds.